Just a few days ago, on the 26th of June, the village of Santon Downham in Suffolk hit 37.3 degrees. That's the hottest June day Britain has ever recorded.
37.3 degrees Celsius in Santon Downham in Suffolk.
And it's the third time in 3 days the June record was broken. The Met Office threw out a red extreme heat warning. Schools shut, the trains slowed to a crawl, and people were queuing for fans that wouldn't arrive for a fortnight. And yet, while the southeast was melting, there were towns in this country where folk had the windows open for the breeze and were reaching for a jumper come evening. That's not luck. That's geography. So today I'm taking you to the 10 towns where Britain still, quietly, keeps its cool. Quick bit of science first, because it matters for every town on the list. The Met Office has an actual definition of a heat wave, and it isn't the same everywhere. Across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the cooler edges of England, the bar is 25 degrees. In London, it's 28. So the southeast has to climb higher before it even counts. And it does again and again. The places that dodge the worst all share three things. They face the Atlantic or the open North Sea, so the water keeps them honest. They sit further north, so the sun's got less punch, and they catch a steady sea breeze that flattens the heat before it can build. In that record summer of 2022, the only regions duller than their long-term average were Northern Ireland, the Western Isles, and Shetland. That's your shortlist in one sentence. Right. From the warm end up to the cool end. Number 10. I'm starting on the west coast of Wales in Aberystwyth, and I'll be straight with you because this is the one town that didn't fully escape. In that record July, the station just down the coast at Aberporth hit 33.6, beating its own record by nearly a full degree after 80 years. So why is it on the list? Because 33 in a once-in-a-generation event against 40.3 in Lincolnshire is still a town that runs cool the other 99% of the time, with the sea dragging the air back down most afternoons. Aberystwyth is mid-Wales's capital in everything but name. National Library up on the hill, the oldest university in the country, and now a UNESCO City of Literature, the first in Wales. It's really two towns at once. In term time, it's thousands of students, thick and cheap, pint cheerful. Out of term, it settles into a slow, Welsh-speaking seaside town, Victorian prom, cliff railway, proper independent shops. On the money, the average home's about 234,000, rent's near 700 a month, and prices actually dipped last year after the council slapped a premium on second homes. The catch is isolation. No motorway, no airport, no direct train to Cardiff, so your own capital's a 5-hour faff away. And the Atlantic storms hit hard. The town's flooded before, and the seawall's been rebuilt right now. Cool, cultured, cheapish, but a long way from anywhere, which is exactly the trade you make when you head to the other end of the country and wrap a great stone wall round yourself instead. That stone wall sits at the very top of England, in Berwick-upon-Tweed, the last town before Scotland, and a place that changed hands 13 times in the medieval centuries before it finally settled as English in 1482. If you're enjoying the journey, a quick tap of subscribe keeps these going, and it's free, which is more than I can say for anything else in this video. Berwick's the dry one, and that surprises people. Tucked behind the Cheviots and the Pennines, it sits in a rain shadow, taking barely any rain by British coastal standards, while the North Sea breeze holds the summers honest. Even in 2022, the heat that reached this coast got switched off late in the day by that cold, grey sea fog that rolls in like someone closing a tap. The town's a beauty, the most complete Elizabethan ramparts in Europe. Stephenson's Great Railway Bridge from 1850, and Lowry painted it more than almost anywhere. The feel is calm, safe, properly settled. Crime's about half the national rate, the schools are good, and it's quietly become a haven for people downsizing out of London, Edinburgh and Newcastle. partly because you can be in either city by train in under an hour. A home averages around 248,000, rents near 670, and the reason it's not dearer is the honest catch. The economy's soft, the young leave for the cities, and there's no full A&E in town, so anything serious means Cramlington, Newcastle, or over the border to Edinburgh. Lovely place to slow down, frustrating one to build a career. From the very top of England, let me take you to the exact opposite, the very bottom, the warm tip that somehow still stays cool. Right at the toe of Cornwall sits Penzance, the most westerly town on the British mainland and the warmest place on this whole countdown, which needs explaining. It's got the highest typical summer high of all 10, about 19 degrees, and the sunniest skies. And yet it still escapes the worst, for the simplest reason going. Sea on 3 sides. When the rest of the country bakes, the water round Mounts Bay won't let the air run away with itself. There's a brilliant detail from a local who's kept weather records here since 1991. In all that time, up until 2022, he'd logged above 28 degrees on just 10 occasions, total. Down here, 28 is an event. The town wears its mild climate openly. Palm trees on the prom, the warmest winters in Britain, and the feel is artistic, independent, a bit weathered. Georgian streets, a working fishing fleet at Newlyn next door, and the country's largest seawater lido, glowing Art Deco blue at the end of the front. Now the money, and brace yourself. The average home's about 329,000, the dearest on the list, and rents average around 1,000 a month, also the dearest, in a county where wages sit at roughly 3/4 of the national average. That's the catch, and it's a serious one. Cornwall's housing crisis is at its sharpest right here. Thousands of second homes, holiday lets swallowing the rentals, locals priced clean out to the town they grew up in. The climate's a dream. The cost of standing in it is the problem. So let me take you back up the western seaboard, to a coast where the prices ease right off and the mountains climb behind the town. That coast is Cumbria, and the town is Whitehaven, a planned Georgian harbour town most people barrelling up the M6 to the lakes never think to turn off for. They should. It sits right on the Irish Sea with its back to the western fells, and that gives it summers around 18 degrees, with a constant onshore flow that never lets the heat settle. In 2022, while inland Cheshire was hitting the high 30s, this stretch of coast sat comfortably in the 20s, the sea breeze doing its quiet work. The town's genuinely handsome once you're in it. Built from scratch by the Lowther family from the 1630s, it was once the 3rd largest port in all of Britain, shipping tobacco across the Atlantic and digging coal out from under the sea. If a town like this is news to you, drop its name in the comments, because half the joy of this channel is finding out which of these you lot have actually been to. The harbour's been transformed from a grubby industrial dock into a proper marina with a museum and a viewing tower, and the wild, quiet western edge of the Lake District is right on the doorstep. The people, by every account I read, are the salt of the earth. On the money, after Penzance, this is a relief, because the average home's only about 182,000, rents close to 660, which beside a national park is near enough a bargain. The catch is real though. Parts of Whitehaven are among the most deprived in England. The big industries that built it have largely gone. It leans heavily on nearby Sellafield for work, and the hospitals had many specialist services, shifted 40 miles to Carlisle. Cheap, cool, beautiful and fragile, all at once. Now, from Whitehaven Harbour, you're looking almost due west across the water. Keep going that way, and you cross the Irish Sea entirely, to a coast where the golf's world famous and the summer's softer still. That coast is the Causeway Coast of Northern Ireland, and the town is Portrush, a proper Victorian seaside resort sat on its own little peninsula, with the Atlantic wrapped round 3 sides. Northern Ireland barely gets hot, and Portrush shows you why. Stuck out on the North Antrim coast with sea nearly all around, Its summers sit around 17, 18 degrees, and even in 2022, when an inland spot in Fermanagh came within a whisker of the all-time NI record, the coast here stayed several degrees cooler, the way it nearly always does. This is a town built for visitors and proud of it. 3 blue flag beaches and Royal Portrush, the only golf course outside Great Britain ever to host the Open, which it did again in 2025. Step out of town and you're minutes from the Giant's Causeway, Dunluce Castle, and one of the great coastal drives in Europe. Out of season, it's a quiet dormitory for the university up at Coleraine, settled community, low crime, median age in its early 40s. On the money, the wider council area averages around 214,000 for a home, with Portrush itself a touch above for the sea views and rents near 800 a month. The catch is the flip side of all that fame. The crowds are relentless. The 2025 Open brought a record 278,000 spectators to a town of barely 6,000. Road closures, gridlock, the place swallowed whole for a week, and even an ordinary summer multiplies the population several times over. Love the buzz and it's heaven. Came for peace and quiet, and July will test your patience and your parking. So let me take you back across the water to Scotland and step up in scale to somewhere that's a proper working city. Granite from end to end. That city is Aberdeen, the great grey granite city on Scotland's north-east shoulder, and it's the one entry for anyone who wants the cool climate without giving up a single thing a proper city offers. It sits up at 57 degrees north on the cold North Sea, so summers average around 18.5. Kept in check by that Har again, the cold sea fog that rolls straight up the beach and caps the heat dead. In the June heatwave of 2025, while southern England pushed into the mid-30s, Aberdeen sat around 25. Fairly typical day out for it. This is no quiet bolt hole, mind. Scotland's third city, getting on for 250,000 people, a university founded in 1495, a 3-mile beach, an art gallery named Scotland's Building of the Year, and that granite that glitters in the sun and sulks magnificently in the rain. The field's reserved, hard-working, quietly confident, with Royal D-side, the Cairngorms and Speyside whisky country right behind it. If you're finding these useful, A-Like tells the algorithm to show it to more people weighing up exactly this kind of move, and that's the only way a channel like this grows. The money's the real surprise. After decades as Britain's oil capital, the average home's actually come down, around 176,000, remarkable for a major city, with rents near 860. And that softness is the catch because it tells a story. Aberdeen's one of only 2 UK cities with fewer jobs now than in 2010. The oil and gas money's drained away, Union Street's visibly thinned, and the whole place is still working out what it becomes next as it pivots to renewables. A real city, and a cool coast for a price that looks too good, but you're buying into a place mid-reinvention. From here, the coast keeps running north, and if you follow it all the way to the top of the mainland, you reach a town with surf, sky and a secret it's about to lose. The top of the mainland is Thurso, the most northerly town on the British mainland, staring across the Pentland Firth toward Orkney, with nothing above it but open water. This is properly far north, and the summers show it, averaging around 16 degrees, with a steady wind off the Firth, and unusually for Scotland, a fairly dry climate, because it sits in the rain shadow of the hills to the west. The town's got a fascinating shape to it. An old Norse trading port that stayed tiny until the 1950s, when the Dounreay nuclear site arrived and turned it overnight into a place of engineers and high wages. Today it's got a world-class surf break at Thurso East, the huge skies of Caithness all around, and a steady stream of tourists tracing the North Coast 500. The feel's quiet, practical, family-minded, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. And on the money, this is the cheapest entry on the whole list. The average home's only around 126,000, rents near 720, and in the right spot overlooking Dunnet Bay. One local called it a cracking place to retire. Downray's being decommissioned, winding down around 2030, and the well-paid technical jobs that held the town up for 2 generations are leaving with it. And the isolation's genuine. The local hospital handles only the basics, so anything serious means a 100-mile drive or a near 4-hour train south to Inverness. And residents will tell you straight that in a bad winter, the supermarket shelves empty when the weather cuts the roads. The bargain of the list, with the longest journey to the rest of the country attached. So from the far northeast, let me swing you right round to the west coast, to the town they call the gateway to the Isles. That gateway is Oban, the bustling little harbour town on Scotland's west coast that's the front door to half the Hebrides, and it earns its top 3 spot by being cool, beautiful, and genuinely alive in a way some of the quieter entries aren't. It sits on a horseshoe bay looking out at Carrera, Mull and Lismore, washed by the Atlantic, and its summers run around 16 degrees, with the nearby island of Tiree holding the title of sunniest spot in all of Scotland. In 2022, the west of Scotland set no new marks and stayed in the comfortable low 20s, while England burned. The feel of Oban is the best of both worlds. It's small, only about 8,000 live there, but in summer the tourists, ferry passengers and cruise visitors swell it to 3 times that, and it crackles round the harbour. It's the self-styled seafood capital of Scotland. It's got a distillery working since 1794, a daft and wonderful Victorian folly called McCaig's Tower up on the hill, and in 2024 it was named Scotland's Town of the Year. On the money, the average home's about 209,000, rents near 850, though I'll warn you the wider region declared a housing emergency a couple of years back, and supplies genuinely tight. The catch is the one that haunts this whole stretch of coast. The ferries. Oban's Scotland's busiest west coast hub, and the ageing fleet's in crisis, cancellations climbing year on year, and in 2025 there was a stretch when 8 of the major vessels were out of action at the same time. Islands short of stock, tourists stranded. Live in Oban itself and you're fine, but the town's whole identity is tied to a sea that's getting less reliable to cross. As one local put it, if the sea doesn't give you a buzz, the downsides are harder to forgive. And from this harbour, that very sea is the road to the next 2 places. Because to reach the coolest towns in Britain, you have to leave the mainland behind entirely. The first stop out across that water is Stornoway, the one true town in the whole of the Outer Hebrides, sat on the sheltered harbour the Vikings named the Steering Bay, more than 40 miles off the mainland. This is where the cool really takes hold, because out here the Atlantic governs everything, and the summers barely move, averaging around 16 degrees, with August nudging just ahead of July, a pure sign of how completely the sea runs the show. And here's the figure that says it all. In over 150 years of weather records, the hottest day Stornoway has ever seen is 26.3 degrees, set back in 1999. Not in an average year, the hottest day ever. So while Coningsby was hitting 40, this town has never, in a century and a half, troubled the upper 20s. If a fact like that makes you want more of them, the comments are open, and I read them, so tell me which of these you'd actually move to. Stornoway holds about 1/3 of the island's whole population, and the feel's slow, traditional and Gaelic speaking, an economy built on fishing, on Harris tweed, woven by hand and protected by law, on crofting, the health service, and a growing offshore wind industry. It's got a hospital, an airport with flights to the mainland cities, an arts centre, a castle and museum, and every July the Hebselt Festival pulls in thousands. On the money, the average home's around 154,000, rents near 725. Very reasonable for somewhere this striking. The catch is the remoteness, plain and simple. The lifeline's a near 3-hour ferry that's cancelled more often than it used to be. The old Sabbath culture still lingers with the big supermarkets shut on Sundays, and specialist care, big shopping, and mainland family all sit on the far side of an Atlantic crossing. A born and bred islander put it beautifully. Outsiders always call the place isolated and bleak, when to her it was a thriving wee town full of life. Comes down to whether the sea round you feels like a wall or a moat. And if Stornoway sounds remote and cool, the place at number 1 takes both of those things and pushes them as far as Britain will allow. The coolest town in Britain is Lerwick, the capital of Shetland, the single most northerly town in the entire United Kingdom, sat 60 degrees north on a treeless archipelago that's genuinely closer to Bergen in Norway than to Edinburgh. If you followed me all the way down the coast to here, this is the summit of the whole idea, because Lerwick doesn't so much escape the heat as refuse to admit it exists. The warmest month is August, and the average high that month, measured at the observatory, is 14.5 degrees. In that record summer of 2022, when the country broke 40 for the first time, Shetland was one of only 3 regions in all of Britain duller than its own long-term average. One local blogger wrote, while the rest of Europe roasted, that they were quietly grateful the wind still blew, and it stayed cool enough to mutter about putting the heating back on. That's the whole video in a sentence. The town's a beauty, a 17th century herring port of flagstone lanes and stone merchants' houses, one of which played a detective's home in the teleseries named after the islands. The feels fiercely independent, Norse to its bones, and far better served than its size suggests. A full hospital, an airport, an overnight ferry to Aberdeen, a cinema and concert hall, and a fishing industry that lands more than England, Wales and Northern Ireland combined. On the money, the average home's around 208,000, rents near 720. And the catch is the thing the cool comes packaged with. The wind and the dark. Lerwick's on the same latitude as Anchorage. The shortest day gives barely under 6 hours of light. The wind blows almost without let-up off the open Atlantic, and in a gale, the ferries and the flights just stop. The summers are glorious, long, light-filled things the locals call the simmer dim. But the long, dark winter is the real test of whether you belong. And that's the deal at the very top of this list. The coolest town in Britain asks the most of you in return. So there it is. 10 towns, top to bottom, where Britain still keeps its cool. And if there's one thing to take away, it's this. The UK doesn't really have a single summer climate anymore. It's got 2, a hot one and a mild one, and the distance between them is stretching wider every year. Whether you'd swap the palm trees on Penzance Prom for the granite streets of Aberdeen, or the buzz of Portrush for the long quiet light of Shetland, comes down to what you can happily live with. The ferries, the hair, the wind, the long drive home from the hospital. None of these places is perfect, and I've tried to give you the catch as honestly as the climate. But if getting away from the heat is the goal, these 10 towns are where this country still quietly knows how to do it. Tell me in the comments which one you'd actually pack a bag for. Give the video a like if the honest version's the one you came for, and I'll see you in the next one.